So on this video, I figured we'd discuss a little bit, do a little thought experiment, some statistical analysis, as we find out if Boston got the better of the Millers. Simply put, the debate between Colin Miller and Kevin Miller, both previous seasons they were with the Boston Bruins. This season, Colin Miller got taken to Vegas via the expansion draft. Kevin Miller stayed with Boston. So let's take a look as we compare these two and see if Boston got the better Miller on this special edition of the Bruins Recap Show. So let's start with Kevin Miller, who's been a career Bruin, playing with Providence as well as the Boston Bruins. He goes 6'2", 210 pounds, and he will be 31 years old during next season, specifically November of next season. In 285 career NHL games, Kevin Miller has accumulated 60 points. This year he played in 68 games, among one of his higher totals, and scored 16 points, 1 goal, 15 assists, with 2 of those 15 being during shorthanded. And in speaking of shorthanded, Kevin Miller totaled 151 total minutes shorthanded for the Boston Bruins, ranking 3rd highest on the team, behind Zdeno Chara and Brandon Carlo. He only had roughly 5 minutes total power play time, 7th on the team in that statistic. Another big factor that you think of when you think of Kevin Miller, you think of hits. Kevin Miller this season, 164 hits. And he averaged on ice 19 minutes and 28 seconds during the regular season. In the playoffs, he did a lot better points-wise. 12 playoff games for the Boston Bruins. He totaled 4 points, 1 goal, 3 assists. However, the big interesting thing about Kevin Miller is his contract situation. He has 1 year left on a 4-year deal that he signed with the Boston Bruins at $2.5 million per year. Very expensive for a 31-year-old second-line defenseman, or third line, depending on what you see in Kevin Miller. Let's talk about that shot.
What a shot.
Colin Miller is the AHL hardest shot record. As I mentioned earlier, he was picked up by the Vegas Golden Knights during this year's expansion draft. Colin Miller goes 6'1", 196 pounds. He is turning 26 years old next season. And in 185 total NHL games, he has put up 70 points. Less games, more points. He played a full season this year. In fact, it was his first full season in the NHL, and I believe only his 2nd or 3rd season playing in the NHL. During the season, he scored 10 goals, 5 of which were on the power play. 31 assists, 12 of which were on the power play. 41 total points, 17 of those on the power play. Averaging a total of 19 minutes, 21 seconds of on-ice time. And in the playoffs this year, he scored 5 points in about 18 playoff games. All of those, or 3 of those, were goals, and all of those goals were scored on the power play, including the very first game scored in the Stanley Cup playoffs a couple of nights ago. Now let's go into some metrics, because the big thing for Colin Miller that most people think about, A, his shot, and B, his presence on the power play. And yes, it is true that Colin Miller has a total of 200 minutes this season of power play ice time. In fact, he led the team, the Vegas Golden Knights. He led them in power play time on ice. However, the thing you do not realize, unless you are looking specifically at this stat or you are a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights for the season, Colin Miller totaled 80 minutes shorthanded time on ice, 4th on the team. He was their 4th highest on-ice penalty killer. A metric you think should be dominated by Kevin Miller, which I mentioned earlier, 164 hits. Colin Miller, in hindsight, has 165 hits. So the thing is, who is the better Miller? Who has the more upside? And by far and away, whether you're looking at, he played a full season, he's better on the power play, he's a decent enough penalty killer, he's younger, he's not quite as big, but he's big enough. Colin Miller is by and far away a better option defensively than Kevin Miller. And as we look to it, as of right now, he has a better contract, being paid only $1 million per year. However, at the end of this season, Colin Miller is a restricted free agency, or a restricted free agent, which is where things get a little interesting, because being the better defenseman, having more points, being more beneficial to you on the power play, and being fairly good shorthanded, next season, Colin Miller is going to cost some money, and a good amount of it. In fact, you could argue that a player of that caliber, who's somewhere in the top 3, top 4 defensemen for a team, is going to get upwards of higher than $2.5 million for 4 years per year. However, here's the question. Where is Colin Miller going to go next season? Who's going to pay him the money? How much is he going to get? We'll find out during free agency. Question, though, for Bruins fans. Would you like to see the Bruins make a move and regain and reacquire Colin Miller for next season, who is statistically better than a Miller you already have? And think of that. Krug, Miller, McAvoy, Grzelcyk. 4 elite, puck-moving, scoring defensemen on one team. That's just my thought. So, hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully you found this entertaining. Probably not, because there was a lot of statistics just being thrown at your face. But that's something I kind of like to do. I kind of like to do these kind of little research projects. All the sources or the websites you can go to kind of look at these statistics for yourselves. Some of which, including time on ice, got rounded up just to make my life a lot easier. So those will be down in the description box below. As far as other ways to see me, I might be doing more of these. We look up other videos and talk about them. Might have a big thing about David Krejci coming up. Maybe a whole a recap, because we are of course into the Bruins off season. Things to look at, things that could possibly happen for Boston going forward, with free agency, etc. upcoming. Because Bruins have some big decisions to make in that department. So might throw some videos your way about that, just to kind of keep the channel going during the off season. As always, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc., etc. And we will see you next time. Like, subscribe, hit bell notifications, and share with all your friends for the next time on the Bruins Recap Show.